Imagine it's a Tuesday morning. You're 61 years old. You've worked for 34 years as a civil engineer for the city of Chicago. Your name is Robert. At 7:43 a.m., your pension statement arrives. You open it expecting confirmation of something you've spent a lifetime building. And you get it, $4,180 per month. Guaranteed. For life. The number is correct. The problem is everything behind it, and Robert has no idea. He makes coffee, sits at the kitchen table where the morning light comes in, looks at the statement with satisfaction. 34 years of contributions, 34 years of watching a portion of every paycheck disappear before he touched it. Into the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, into the promise. He does the math. He's done it 100 times before. $50,160 per year. Not luxury, but enough. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. The occasional trip to see his daughter in Portland. Solid, dignified. The reward for 34 years of designing water treatment systems. He folds the statement carefully, files it with the others. 34 statements, 34 years. One number, growing every year, moving reliably toward this moment. Robert feels, for the first time in a long time, genuinely secure. He shouldn't. Not because the number is wrong, but because the number is not the system. And the system is something else entirely. There is a document that exists for every public pension fund in America, required by law, published every year, available to every pension participant who asks for it. Almost none of them ever do. It's called the Actuarial Valuation Report, and it contains the number that Robert's statement never shows him, the number that determines whether the $4,180 is solid, or whether it is an intention dressed up as a guarantee. There's a number that determines everything. You've probably never seen it. Robert hasn't. It's called the funded ratio. Here's what it means, simply, plainly. If your pension fund has a funded ratio of 100%, it holds everything it needs to pay every promised benefit to every current retiree, to every future retiree, including you. 100% means the math works. But there's a problem. Robert's fund is not at 100%, not at 90, not at 80. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, the fund holding Robert's $4,180 promise, is funded at 43%. Let that land. 43 cents for every dollar promised. A gap of 57% between what exists and what has been guaranteed. And Robert's statement, the one he just filed carefully with 33 others, does not mention this number, not once. The statement is designed to reassure you, not to inform you, not to warn you, not to explain the system it depends on. Now here is where it gets more specific, because 43% is the number the fund itself reports, using its own assumptions. And the most important assumption, the one buried deepest, is the assumed rate of return. Robert's fund assumes 7.5% annual returns, every year, for decades. Here's the problem, it hasn't done that. Over the last 20 years, the fund's actual average return has been 6.4%, not 7.5. 6.4, a gap of 1.1%. Sounds small. Compounded over decades, it represents hundreds of millions of dollars of additional unfunded liability, money that does not exist, that does not appear in the statement Robert receives. Now, consider this. Private sector pension funds, regulated under federal law, are required to use conservative return assumptions, typically 3 to 4%. Not 7.5. If Robert's fund used the same rules, its funded ratio would not be 43%. It would be closer to 28%. 28 cents for every dollar promised. The statement would look very different. But public pension funds are not subject to those rules. They set their own assumptions. And the assumptions they set are the ones that make the mathematics look most manageable, not most accurate. This is the number behind the number, the assumption behind the promise, the architecture beneath the statement that arrives on Tuesday mornings. The promise is not a guarantee. It is an intention, and intentions change when the math stops working. Now let us be specific about the scale of this, because this is not just Illinois. This is a national condition. The average funded ratio for state pension systems across America, as measured by the Pew Charitable Trusts, is approximately 72%, using each fund's own assumptions. Using more conservative assumptions, the kind required of private sector funds, independent analysts estimate the true average at closer to 55%. 55 cents for every dollar promised across the entire country. Illinois, 43% funded. New Jersey, approximately 35% funded. Kentucky, approximately 47% funded. Connecticut, approximately 52% funded. California Public Employees. Retirement system, the largest public pension fund in the United States, reported a funded ratio of approximately 72% in 2023, using its own return assumption of 6.8% annually. Independent analysts estimate the true funded ratio at closer to 50%. Now add Social Security. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to be exhausted by approximately 2033 under current law. At that point, incoming payroll taxes would cover approximately 77% of scheduled benefits, a 23% automatic reduction, unless Congress acts. Congress will almost certainly act, but the action available is some combination of benefit reductions, retirement age increases, means testing, and tax increases. There's no option that delivers the currently scheduled benefit without either significant new revenue or significant structural modification. The Social Security trustees publish this information annually. It is available at ssa.gov. It is read by almost nobody. That past delivery guarantees future delivery is precisely the assumption that every pension crisis in history has exposed as false. These numbers are not warnings about theoretical future risks. They are descriptions of current conditions, measured today, published today, available to anyone willing to look. Now, let us examine what happens when the gap between assumption and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Because this is not theoretical. This is documented. In 2013, Detroit filed for bankruptcy, the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history at the time. Detroit's pension funds were underfunded by approximately $3.5 billion. Retirees who had been promised specific monthly benefits, people who had worked for decades, contributed faithfully, received written documentation, received reductions. Some lost their cost of living adjustments entirely. Some lost healthcare benefits they had been promised for life. These were not reckless people. Not speculators, garbage collectors, librarians, city clerks, people who showed up every day for 30 years and trusted that the number on the statement was the number they would receive. It was not. In Greece, between 2010 and 2018, the government implemented 12 separate rounds of pension cuts. 12. A retired civil servant receiving 1,800 euros per month in 2009 was receiving approximately 900 euros per month by 2018. Not through one dramatic announcement, through 12 incremental revisions, each described as the final adjustment required, each followed by another. The pension technically survived. Its purchasing power did not. In Puerto Rico, the government debt crisis forced pension cuts affecting hundreds of thousands of public employees. Workers who had contributed their entire careers to systems they believed were protected discovered that protection and mathematics are not the same thing. In Pritchard, Alabama, the pension fund ran out of money in 2009. The city stopped writing checks, not reduced checks, no checks. Retirees who had been promised monthly benefits received nothing. For months, different countries, different systems, same outcome. Detroit, 2013, Greece, 2010 to 2018, Puerto Rico, 2016, Pritchard, 29, recent, documented, verified. And they all followed the same pattern, the same 5 stages. Every pension crisis follows the same pattern, 5 stages, every time, without exception. Stage 1, the promise. Benefits are designed during periods of optimism. Returns are strong. Demographics are favorable. Promises are generous because they appear affordable. Stage 2, the shift. The ratio of active workers to retirees deteriorates. Each worker supports a larger share of retiree benefits. The mathematics tighten, but still appear manageable. Stage 3, the gap. Investment returns fail to meet optimistic assumptions. The gap between assets and obligations widens. Actuarial reports document the widening. Annual statements continue showing only the promised number. Stage 4, the delay. Addressing the gap requires painful choices. Higher taxes, reduced services, or lower benefits. All 3 are politically painful. All 3 are deferred. The gap grows. And then, stage 5, the adjustment. Pause on that word. Not collapse, not crisis. Adjustment. That is the word governments use. Actuarial adjustment. Benefit recalculation. Modified formula. The language is bureaucratic. The impact is not. The gap becomes impossible to defer. A recession, a market crash, a revenue shortfall. Emergency measures are announced. The modification that was politically impossible before the crisis becomes politically inevitable during it. The adjustment that nobody was willing to make when there was time gets made anyway, just later, with less warning, and fewer options for the people inside it. Roberts Fund is currently in stage 3, approaching stage 4. The actuarial reports document this. The annual statements do not. Now, here's what most people miss when they hear this. They hear it as a prediction. They hear, your pension will be cut. That is not what this analysis is saying. What this is saying is more specific and more useful. The architecture beneath your pension contains documented vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are measurable. They are measured. They are published. The people who navigated pension crises with the least damage were not the ones who predicted the exact timing. Nobody predicted that. They were the ones who understood the architecture before the crisis arrived and built accordingly. This distinction matters enormously. Understanding the architecture does not require panic, does not require abandoning your pension. In most cases, pension contributions offer employer matches, tax advantages, and compounding effects that remain mathematically compelling regardless of long-term uncertainty. The argument is not to contribute less. The argument is to build alongside the pension, to ensure that a single institutional promise is not the only load-bearing wall in your financial structure, because load-bearing walls can be modified. And by the time the modification arrives in the form of a letter rather than a statement, the time to build alternative support has already passed. The mathematical reality of this is simple. If your pension represents 90% of your retirement income, and it is cut by 25%, your total income falls by 22.5%. If your pension represents 50% of your retirement income, and it is cut by 25%, your total income falls by 12.5%. Same cut, dramatically different impact. A retired Detroit city worker with a pension as their only income experienced the 2013 cuts as a direct reduction in their standard of living. No cushion, no alternatives. A retired Detroit city worker who had maintained independent savings, paid off their home, built other income sources, experienced the same cuts, but had other resources to draw on. The loss was real. The catastrophe was not. The historical record across every pension crisis studied, Detroit, Greece, Puerto Rico, the collapse of corporate pension funds across the 1980s and 1990s, shows this pattern with remarkable consistency. The depth of the crisis, for individuals, correlated directly with the concentration of their financial dependence on the system under stress. The wealthy understand this instinctively. Their retirement income comes from multiple sources. Investments across different asset classes, properties, business income. The pension, if they have one, is one component among many. The middle class was told the pension was enough, that the number on the statement was the architecture, that the promise was the guarantee. It was not told about the funded ratio, not shown the actuarial report, not given the number behind the number. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. The annual statement is designed to communicate clearly. The actuarial report is designed for compliance. The gap between those two documents is where most pension participants spend their entire working lives. There is one more layer that most analyses miss entirely. It is the most frequently deployed mechanism of pension reduction, and the least visible. It is called inflation erosion. A nominal benefit cut requires a decision, a vote, a letter. It is visible. It generates response. Inflation erosion requires none of these things. If Robert's pension is fixed at $4,180 per month, and inflation runs at 3% annually, the real purchasing power of that benefit falls by approximately 26% in 10 years, by 45% in 20 years. The statement keeps arriving. The number keeps looking correct. The purchasing power quietly declines. Robert does not receive a letter. He receives the same statement, with the same number. But the groceries cost more. The utilities cost more. The trip to Portland costs more. The number is unchanged. The life it funds is not, and no letter ever arrives. Many pension systems include cost of living adjustments designed to protect against this erosion. But cost of living adjustments are among the first elements modified when pension systems face fiscal stress. Detroit retirees lost their COLA in the 2013 bankruptcy settlement. Illinois suspended its COLA for existing retirees as a budget measure. The protection that was supposed to exist against inflation erosion is itself subject to revision. The inflation protection is a policy commitment, not a mathematical guarantee. And policy commitments change when the mathematics make them impossible to honor. Now consider the international picture, because this is not uniquely American. In Germany, the statutory contribution rate has risen from 18% of wages in the 1990s to 18.6% today, with projections requiring further increases. German workers are paying an increasing fraction of their wages to fund a growing retiree population. In France, pension reform triggered months of nationwide protest in 2023, not because the mathematics were wrong, but because the political cost of acknowledging them had been deferred until the adjustment became unavoidable. Systems that adjust early produce modest, manageable changes. Systems that defer produce crises. France deferred. The crisis arrived on schedule. Japan operates under the most severe demographic pressure of any major economy. The system has been maintained through financial repression, holding interest rates artificially low, which functions as a silent tax on every retiree holding fixed income assets. The pension is technically paid. Its real value is quietly eroded. In the United Kingdom, the state pension age has been raised repeatedly, from 60 to 65 for women, from 65 to 66 for both genders. Further increases are projected. The promise technically survives each revision. What changes is when you receive it. And for how many years? Different countries, different systems. Same 5 stages, same outcome. The pattern is not cultural. It is structural. built into every defined benefit system that made promises under demographic assumptions that no longer hold. Robert will receive his pension. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund will not simply stop writing checks tomorrow. The legal and political framework around public pensions creates real resistance to outright elimination. But at some point in the coming decade, Robert may receive a letter, not a statement, a letter. The letter will inform him of an actuarial adjustment, a recalculation, a new figure. The new figure will be lower than $4,280. By how much? By $200, by $500, by more? Depends on what the Illinois legislature does, what the investment markets do, how the demographic arithmetic evolves over the next 10 years. None of these variables are within Robert's control. What is within Robert's control right now, today, while the statement still shows $4,180, while the letter has not yet arrived, is whether his retirement plan can absorb a modification without collapsing. That question is not answered by reading the annual statement. It is answered by reading the actuarial report. The funded ratio is on page 47. The assumed return is on page 63. The unfunded liability is on page 89. The honest mathematics of the promise. Available at imrf.org. 200 pages. Most people will never read them. Robert has not read them. He filed the statement. 34 statements, 34 years. The filing cabinet is full of reassurance. One day, Robert will receive a letter. Not a statement, a letter. And the number will be different. Not because anyone lied, not because he did anything wrong, not because the system was malicious, but because the math finally caught up to the promise, the demographic arithmetic that was always moving, the investment returns that were always below the assumption, the gap that was always widening, always documented, always available, in a report that nobody sent him. The question is not whether that letter arrives. The question is, what happens to your life when it does? Are you Robert who filed the statement, or are you the version of Robert who also read the actuarial report, who understood that $4,180 was an intention, not a guarantee, who built around that understanding while there was still time to build? This is historical and educational analysis. It is not financial advice. Every pension situation is different. Funding ratios vary, legal protections vary, political environments vary. What does not vary is the underlying structure, the demographic arithmetic, the actuarial assumptions, the legal precedent established in Fleming versus Nestor in 1960, which ruled explicitly that pension contributions do not create a contractual right. They create an expectation, honored as long as the political system finds it possible to honor it. The structure is consistent, the timing is uncertain, and the distance between those two facts is where most pension participants spend their entire working lives. Leave a comment below with one question. What is the funded ratio of your pension system? Look it up before you answer. Most people in this comment section have never checked. The ones who have post numbers that change how other people think about their own situation. That conversation is happening below this video right now. If this changed how you think about the number on your statement, share it with someone who needs to see it. A colleague, a friend, a parent building their entire retirement around a single promise. Because the letter, when it arrives without warning. The people who understood the architecture before it arrived had options. The people who understood it after had memories of what the options used to be.